Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader, and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place, because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. Well, welcome back, friends, and thank you for taking time to invest in yourself and those you serve by focusing on your leadership development. Today, I am excited about our episode and our guest. We are going to learn from an all-around excellent leader, scholar, teacher, and just great human being, Dr. Marcy Brown Marsden. She is the newly appointed Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, Texas. And prior to this, she served as the interim provost at Midwestern, as well as she has, I believe, 7 years of experience as the dean of the McCoy College of Science, Mathematics, and Engineering, also at Midwestern. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to those of you leading in higher education, and it's my pleasure to welcome her to the show. So, Marcy, welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. How are things going at Midwestern State?
It's just going well. We're just about to, we just returned from our break, and we're about to start our spring semester, and we're gathering up all the things that we need to do to be able to get ready for the students to return.
And I should ask too, again, official congrats. You are, you've been in the office as interim, but you are newly minted official, no more interim title. How's that going?
You know, it's been good. So I was appointed the interim provost back in December of 2022, and then served for just about a year before that search completed for the permanent appointment. In that time, it was a little bit of a challenge. We had 3 presidents during that time, so we had some significant change with our upper level leadership and a lot of people moving in different positions. So it was very much a change management environment where many of us were learning our roles, and some people were finding new ways to serve the campus. And so being permanent is a relief, I think, to see that there's some decisions maybe you can make that are different. And we also have a great new president who started in August of 2023. So I think she's been great to work with, and I think she and I have a good partnership already.
Well, and we will talk more about that in the podcast, but honestly, that says a lot about you, your character, and what your colleagues think of you, because even though there was some, it was less than stable above your head in the organizational chart, the fact that they had the confidence in you to continue and be that stable variable, that says a lot. And that brings me into what I like to ask all of our guests to start. So talk to us, what's your leadership journey? How did Dr. Marcy Brown Marsden arrive in your current position as Provost and VP of Academic Affairs at Midwestern State University?
Well, I think it sort of starts even before I went to college. I was a first generation college student. My family had no one who had gone to college before, I went to as an undergrad. And so to me, seeing that having that opportunity is really important. A lot of first gen students have that, they're experiencing everything for the first time for their families, for their journey is very new for everybody. I borrowed a lot from my dad, was Air Force, and a lot of the family had not gone to college, but they'd gone into military service. And so seeing him lead was a very interesting example growing up, seeing how he did that as an NCO in the Air Force and growing those leadership positions. So I think that there was probably an environment that cultivated this knowledge that what leaders do. When I went, eventually when I got my degree and went on to my first position, starting out as a traditional faculty member, but not far into it after, I think the ink may have been dry on my tenure decision when I was asked to be a department chair. And so I was in a position of being kind of between some people who were relatively new and some people who'd been there for some time. And so I was asked if I would serve as the department chair. And I said yes to that opportunity, and being chair of a biology department. And one of the things I think from that experience was to say that once you've been offered and taken that new job, the next step is always to get a little bit more training and a little bit more background to see how the job is done. And so when I became a department chair, I went back and got some chairs training at a CIC chairs workshop, and got a little bit more knowledge on budget and managing people and managing curricula. After I served as chair for about let's see, it would have been maybe about 8 years during that time. But in that time period, I had the chance to try to do some reorg in curriculum, had the chance to think a little bit more about budget. That was probably central to a lot of decisions to be made, was that there were some budgetary alignments that needed to be made. And in the course of that, I also got placed in charge of a project doing some compliance for environmental compliance within the sciences in our whole campus, and environmental compliance with EPA regulations on college campuses, which is a big issue. And when I was placed in charge of that, it meant, having not just to be my local department as a department chair, but having to work with all across campus, including all of the sciences, as well as art, for example, and their use of chemicals and waste management, and with our facilities people. And so at that time, then the dean realized is that I needed to have a leadership role that allowed me to cross those disciplinary boundaries. So I was appointed an associate dean in 2012, and became that associate dean, and was able to work not only on that project, but also some other compliance projects, accreditation projects, and then with some student-facing issues. When I decided to become an associate dean, again, that leveling up was to get a little bit more experience. In that case, what I went for was an MBA, to realize I needed some organizational management at a higher level, some strategic planning background, some leadership, what the basis foundations of leadership are. And so when I became an associate dean, I started a journey to get an MBA. In the course of that, then I started applying for dean positions, and eventually became the dean here at Midwestern State University in 2015. And as you said, I served for about 7.5 years in the dean role, coming into a position that had experienced interims for many years, and the college was very much in need of a move from a survival point of view to a strategic point of view. And so the ability to do that was really good, getting some resources to the college to be able to grow, putting some practices in place to be able to make sure that we were doing what we needed to do. And then as said earlier, that after serving for 7.5 years, I became the interim provost here at Midwestern. So for me, my leadership journey has been very traditional: dean to associate dean chair to associate dean to dean, and then to provost. But I think that's okay. Having seeing that that accretion, that growth of a lot of experience on a college campus has really helped at each level. And looking back as well, working with those people who are in those positions now, chairs and deans, and having had that experience is very helpful.
Well, I would say, Marcy, I agree and disagree with you. On paper, you've been very traditional, but kudos to you. A lot to unpack here. Serving as the EPA compliance officer, getting an MBA, which I'm guessing is, if your background is more in biological sciences, that was probably different than what you were used to, but that shows your commitment to growth. I guess what I would like to know, because you have been very multidisciplinary as a leader, and I love what you said there, is moving the institution or the department or the unit from survival to strategic. And we'll talk a little bit about that more with your oversight and leadership for accreditation. But because you served as a chair for, I think you said, 8 years, and even within that role, you probably wore more hats than most would as a typical chair. And you pursued leadership development. We know from research that chairs, and actually recently I just looked at a poll from Gallup. Heck, managers across the world go into the job not really prepared as well as they should be. So what advice would you have for people listening that are new chairs? Maybe they're struggling chairs, maybe they're thinking about chairs. You approached it with what I would consider a growth mindset, and you really made yourself better. I'm sure there were struggles. We all struggle in the beginning. But what advice would you have for somebody that's wanting to improve as a chair or become a chair, knowing that we all have an academic background, but a lot of times the role of the chair is a lot different than what made us a successful scholar and teacher?
Well, I think what you said is that we all have that similar academic background. So if you become a chair, as I did, of a biology department, all of us were biologists. And so we'd all been within that, we've been working together. You have then at that point, you're given a particular position, but you have to say, okay, what is going to allow me to differentiate a little bit more, to say, I'm going to look at some things a little bit differently than I did as a faculty member, while retaining that knowledge that I had as a faculty member about the things that did work, that didn't work, the struggles that we had. And so when you take that position, to me, again, what was central is that we can't assume anything about how we know things work. And we're going to experience a lot of things that are very new. So managing a budget is, as I said, the thing that I started with. And what I felt at that time was it was the source of struggle and inequity in the department in which I'd been for many years. And so when you looked at that inequity, if you could find, and what we know, of course, is that people place their values, their budget is a reflection of their values, their budget is a reflection of how they are investing those resources. And so for that, so starting as a new chair, starting with budget, which is the source of such friction and challenge, and then say, okay, but I'm going to start with budget, but I don't know all I need to know about budget. So I do need to go and learn a little bit more from people who have more experience than I do. So saying that, so if you come from your group of peers there in the department, gaining that experience is what is going to help you to say, okay, to those people you're going to ask to make hard decisions or ask me to follow your lead on something, is to say, I have this background that I've gone to get to have a little bit more knowledge. I'm not just going by the seat of my pants. I'm actually trying to take a measured and informed approach to looking at what we need as a department. And so when you are asking people to make hard decisions on, well, we're going to cut some spending here, we're going to add some spending here, recognizing that that we are all still in the same department. We're all still impacting each other. If I take more, you receive potentially less as a result on a budgetary point of view. And then it applies to a lot of other things with how you decide on course loads, or how you decide on what committee responsibilities people have. You're going to have to say, okay, we're working together on this. So for me, the experience both in a formal way at things like chairs conferences, opportunities to have professional development, and then informally just to say, becoming aware of the higher ed landscape and some of the terms and the histories and the coming trends that are happening in higher ed. That's another piece, is staying tapped into. So just as you did as a biologist, staying tapped into your discipline, reading the journals, going out there and learning that, taking that same approach when it came to being a chair. Say, let's read the journals, let's read the Chronicle, let's read all the resources that we have that are telling us what we might need to know about what's coming, whether it's a demographic cliff or whether it's a change in legislative policy in your state. All of those things we can't be surprised by. And so you've got to prepare your department for those things. And so I think that's where it starts as chair. You get that experience of having the decisions are perhaps a little less far reaching, but they're still nonetheless impactful to your department. So if you bring to it the knowledge that you should have, and then also not bringing with it. So I could start as a chair, and this would be my advice. What not to do is to say, now that I have this chair position, I'm going to start wielding this power in a way that helps me to advance my goals at the expense of everybody else. And that's the direction you don't want to go into. And so some of that leadership training is going to help you to know how to do that, or how to avoid those pitfalls that you might have in leadership.
Really like what you said about, to me, it shows you understand the importance of being vulnerable as a leader. You said you look for and you sought out people that knew more than you in certain areas, so you could grow. I also think it's important to remind leaders that it's not about just wielding power. And so you've touched on it already in some of your responses, but a little more specifically, then talk to us a little bit about your leadership philosophy, and maybe the extent to which it's changed as you have progressed from the ranks of dean to or chair to dean to provost?
Yeah, so I think there are my leadership has typically been in a more generic sense to try. I'm very collaborative. I try to consult with people, to ask questions, to see people one on one, to talk to people face to face. That's very important. I think it has been very important for me. It often takes time. It takes effort to go and do that. It takes energy to be able to see people and to go out and talk to people. That's really important. With me, what I've seen is that, especially moving into the dean position and now provost position, that when I see leading people, you're tasked with reaching those organizational goals, whether it's your department, whether it's your college, whether it's your academic component, or for a president to reach the entire goals for the whole organization that you're part of. But you want to see the organization reach its goals, but you also want to see individuals reach their goals. And so one of the things, by talking to people, recognizing that people have really strong potential. They may have potential in their own way to be leaders, either in their areas, or maybe in the future have a long-term goal for becoming a leader. And I love to find people like that, because what I know is that if they have that goal, that ambition, that motivation to maybe think about what they could do beyond that, they're going to be working really hard with you and for you to do the best they can individually, because they want to achieve their own goals. But what that's going to do is it's going to lift the organization in a way that it needs. If they want to get better on data management, that they're going to be a real strength in data management, and at some point surpass perhaps even the expectations of the job that they're doing at the moment. But that means that they're planning for what they might be doing in the future. Now, it means a sense of risk when you have those individuals who are really strongly hardworking, have ambition to go. The question is, well, they may leave us someday. They may go somewhere else. Well, that's great if they're leaving your institution, if they're leaving your organization to follow that ambition and for good reasons, and they're not being pushed away because they're not happy with the organization that they're in. So it's to say that there are ways that those individual goals are going to help to feed into a larger organizational goal that we all need to reach, that to be successful. And so finding those people, it takes being out there and talking with them, and then identifying what can we put in their area of responsibility that might help to add another dimension to their knowledge base and their leadership opportunity, that will make them a future dean, a future provost, that not seeing that as a threat, but seeing that as an opportunity for them and for the organization.
I always say that whenever the question of people leaving for what might be better jobs, or I always say I want to go after folks that quite frankly could go other places,
Mhm.
but because of the culture we create and all of those things, for however long we're lucky enough to have them, will stay with us.
Mhm.
And it sounds to me that, is it safe to say that in your journey as either a college student, grad student, professor, somewhere along the line, it sounds like you've had some pretty good mentors as well?
I have, I can say that I'm a biologist, a field biologist, because of a mentor that I had early on that helped me realize that maybe vet school wasn't a great goal, but maybe going in to do field biology would be a way to do some of the things I wanted to do without, having to go and be be the trained as a veterinarian, and having that experience. I've seen some great leaders. There have been some people that I've had in those positions that I see how they handle people. I see how they handle a challenge, and you watch how they do that. It's really important. And then, quite frankly, we've all seen people who we see their practice and we don't want to do that. That's not a part of our. That's not something we want to do. So I think it helps both to have those examples that are really positive and good, and then some of those that have told us that, maybe it's not that they're a bad leader or that they're doing poor decisions. It's just we have a different style. And sometimes that's very helpful too, to recognize that my style of doing things, consultative, working with people, is not what other people are going to see as their style. And so recognizing that we have to still work with them and be able to get along and make decisions together, even if we have a different style for getting there.
So I want to then transition in. I like to ask unique facts, experiences, or accomplishments of our guests here. You have a few that you shared that I think are really impactful. The first one is you talked about not only working with and overseeing accreditation, but it sounds like it would be safe to say you had a positive impact and probably changed the culture of accreditation. You want to talk about that and anything that you think would be relevant for our listeners, certainly from a leadership standpoint?
Well, I think you start with this saying that accreditation is not always a word that people love on a college campus, right? Or saying that something needs to be done because our accreditor wants us to do that, whether it's a programmatic accreditor or a regional accreditor, it doesn't necessarily compel someone to want to have to comply. I mean, it can be onerous, and so we have to understand why. When we talk about it in terms of continuous improvement, that accreditation is a lot of it is about a continuous improvement, and so we all as an organization, as individuals, should be seeking that continuous improvement. So when we look at those expectations of our accreditor, they're just simply asking us to see what we can do to refine, to do better, to change, maybe in small ways or in big ways sometimes. So when I've been in charge of accreditation, so at my former university, being placed in charge of a quality enhancement plan, which is a big scale thing that SAC-COC asks you to do, being put in charge of that, and talking to them to say, okay, we may not have thought about this as a campus. We may have not have thought about this dimension that we could cultivate for our students, but if we make a big change to try to have that happen, we may not necessarily be able to get there through small incremental changes. It has to be a big effort. And so then you start saying, okay, what do we do? How do we do it? How do we find the resources we need to be able to accomplish it? There's going to be faculty resources that we need to bring to play into helping us accomplish this. And then really try to say, okay, what are our outcomes? And how will we see if we achieve those outcomes? And so communicating about that, I was placed in charge of a career-focused QEP that was at a very traditional liberal arts institution. And so sometimes career was seen as anathema to the notion of cultivating student knowledge through the liberal arts in a much more free way. And so how do you reconcile those two things? Well, you root them in mission, right? You say, okay, we can say this is still part of our mission. It's just a different way of achieving that mission. When it came to after that was completed, I was placed in charge of something that didn't go well with our accreditor, with that reaffirmation that we had. And it had to do with an assessment process we were doing for our gen ed. And now that's central. That's fundamental to an institution. If you don't do well on that gen ed, then you have to really review and trying to convince that through, again, you can't say, well, because accreditors want us to do that. It's because it's the right thing to do to make sure what we're doing works. We may have an assumption, but we need to be able to test that assumption and see whether we have the data to back it up. And so, again, approaching it in a way that there was very strong resistance to that, well, our gen ed just works. It just works. Well, that's not an adequate assessment process. So we can't just say it works, because we may feel it works, but does it work for our students? Do our students see value in what they're getting? When I came to MSU, we'd had with a programmatic accreditor. I arrived on day one and was told by our provost at the time, who told me all the things I should be on watch for. And one of those was saying, hey, we had this programmatic accreditor visit and they found some issues. And so I just wanted you to be aware of this. We're going to hear back about this accreditation visit. So she tells me this on day one, and on day two is when the letter came from the accreditor. And so, there was no breathing room really to be able to say, well, let me think and get a handle on this issue and try to figure it out. There were some big things to fix. And so, how do we set about doing that? The first way we do it is, well, we trust the people who work in that program. We talk to them. We ask them how they constructed it, think about how they view continuous improvement and how they view their assessment process. We went through a very painful period of time where we were trying to correct a lot of things that eventually we did. And then our next reaffirmation visit from that programmatic accreditor, everything went well because we backed it out by 14 months. And we said, okay, knowing that what we went through the last time, we're going to back out our preparation process to be about 14 months to say, how can we do better in making sure we have the lead up to be knowledgeable about what we need to do for the next time they come. So while we had maybe this number of issues the first, 6 years ago, we're going to have 0 issues, which we did in our next time around on that. And so it's being humble to say we could improve, I think, having a plan for that, both in terms of correcting if it's retroactive or planning if it's proactive, and then really giving yourself, bringing the team together, working on it piece by piece, month by month as you lead into your visit. And then also being really careful, paying attention to what the accreditor wants, listening. I think a lot of people want to tell, but it's really important also to listen, to say, what does this accreditor want and why do they want it? And it really does mean something for us to achieve that. So I don't mind those thorny accreditation issues, because they seem, at least you have this momentary panic as I got that letter on day 2 of my job. This is a problem. And then you say, okay, let's just set about fixing it. You could sit here and be upset and feel like this is not going to work, or you can set to work. And that's what I have tried to do in that accreditation process, is let's just set to work.
Well, and congrats. I think any of us that have been in higher ed for maybe more than, I don't know, 10 minutes, we understand the importance of accreditation, and that is no small feat to lead that effort. And so again, that just kind of underscores the value of your leadership philosophy and gaining consensus, and you said being humble enough to know that you need to change. I said it when we started the show that I really appreciate anyone that has not only been in an interim leadership role, but then even more so, truly puts himself out there among known colleagues to interview and be a finalist and then get the job.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because we might have people that are listening that eventually might be in that role. Maybe they'll be more empathetic to those that are, but I say that with all sincerity. I have a lot of respect for you and others that have accomplished that. Anything you'd like to share about not only being the interim, but then getting the interim title removed?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot of people, approach that with fear. They don't want to do it, or they approach it with maybe even this dread that what happens next. And so it's been one of the reasons I've been a member of ACAD for a long time, and I'm a board member now. And one of the things that we have coming up, I've been working on a talk for a workshop that we have in February for this very question, with a group of people who have been in that interim role. We've talked about the 3 parts of being interim. The first is saying yes to the job. The second part is doing the job. And the third part is your exit strategy. What is it going to be when you potentially leave that job? And so that, I guess, you start with a fundamental principle that says that interim is not less of a job, it's just a period of time. One of my former bosses sort of used that phrasing when he talked about it, but it is a period of time and it's not necessarily doing less. So accepting that job, the first is to know that you have tried to prepare yourself all along, that you feel like, okay, I could level up for this job, or I could do what's asked to do. And even, me becoming an interim provost, I remember going to my first chairs conference and talking in the meet and greet part of it, that we were learning about people, and somebody said, well, I'm a chair now, but I really want to be a provost. And I thought, what an amazing thing to say, that someone would say sort of out loud, they want to be a provost. They're a chair now, but they want to be a provost. And saying, okay, what does that take to have that mindset, that you're thinking about that for your future? And so what it means is that, it's following that trying to have the tools to say, okay, if I'm going to accept an interim job, I feel like I've tried all along to gather those tools that I might need, and think that I could apply them. So saying yes to that, and also defining with the person who's asking you to do that. And I think for me, one of the important things about making that decision to say yes was, do other people want me to? So in talking to the president at the time, when she asked me to serve as interim, or whether I'd be interested in serving as interim, I actually met with her before that, and I said, I understand that people have nominated me for this. People have suggested my name to put my hat in the ring for me. I want to say that I would accept that because I see other people around me that think I could do it. So not only is that I think I've gathered the tools, but there's the trust and the desire for other people who work for me, who would be working for me, who'd want me to do the job. In serving as interim, I think so being in that second part of the issue is in serving as interim, you certainly don't want to do damage, but it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing. And so what I've found, two tremendously valuable things, the bedrock for serving as interim. One is policy, making sure that you are knowledgeable or at least can find what you need to know about policy, as the underpinning for a lot of our decisions on higher ed. And the second is data, making sure that we have access to data truth and are acting on data that are accurate. So if we approach an interim position by saying, okay, I'm going to have a fundamental principle that looking at policy, looking at data, avoids the sense of you making a capricious decision, or when you're trying to communicate that decision, saying, I may be interim and this decision may be permanent, but here are the data that show why we need to do it. So I have by no means avoided big decisions in my time as interim. I got appointed in December, and our reaffirmation visit from SAC-COC was in March. And so I just was thrown into having to be at the head. But one of the things I trusted was, the people around me, but also, again, you understand what the policies are, what we need to know. And then when we make those decisions, to feel that even though I'm an interim person making a permanent decision, that this has been thoughtful and consultative and communicated with people. Now, as far as the exit strategy, the third part of being interim is to say that, if you feel like you want the job, it is a really hard experience to be feeling like you are interviewing for the job every single day. When they know that you're going to do a search and that you're still interviewing for that job every single day. And so knowing that your decisions are a little bit more under the microscope than you would have hoped it would be, but they're seeing how you'll operate. But one of the things that I did in my interview process, which I think I'd suggest to anybody who is serving in an interim role, is they will see you do functionally the job in the day-to-day. They will be the person that they're reporting to. They'll be the person who is the responsible, the figurehead for things that are happening. That functional part's important, but you also, I think one of the hardest things for an interim to be able to communicate is their vision, because they've not really, the job's vision has not been their vision, at least while they're serving as interim. So one of the most important things I think to be able to do is to say in that job talk or in the conversations you have with people, is to make sure that you can show, not only can I do this functionally, but I can also tell you what I see as the higher order vision. And so when I went into it with that approach, I felt that was one of the reasons why maybe that worked out well for me, is that to say that I can have a vision. And the other thing is just to say that they have seen your CV on your previous position at the university. They've had the chance to see you. You've interviewed before on campus, but they deserve to have another look, right? To say, let's put our CV out there. Let's put our accomplishments out there, that you've accrued in that time between when you took your job for the first time at an institution and then when you're in an interim seeking to be that permanent person. And so it's a really important thing to be able to say that here, to be transparent about what your experiences are, because many people might not know it. They might not know about my MBA, and that became something that people became aware of. They might not know I did something with Cornell ILR school to be able to learn about diversity and inclusion, so some of those things that they became aware of in the course of the interview process. So I'd say thinking about, how to accept, how to do, and how to exit is really important at some point. And so, and the biggest challenge, of course, is what happens if I don't get it, and have a plan B. That's the other thing, is because it will happen. It can happen. It has happened. And we have to make sure we have that alternate path should we not be here in the permanent role.
Well, you mentioned that you're going to provide a workshop at ACAD. Also along those lines, even if we have people that are not deans, don't think they want to be a dean, you want to check out that check out ACAD. Marcy has also written a chapter for the resource handbook for academic deans that I think you might want to look at. I think, Marcy, you could do an entire book on serving as an interim and transitioning. One thing that I took away is not only does it show you are a very courageous leader. I really like Brene Brown's work. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but that falls right in line with that. But you made something that really resonated with me. You said an interim appointment doesn't mean that you can't make permanent decisions. And I really want that to resonate with people listening, because it takes courage to do that. but it is the right thing to do. So as we kind of close out here, I want to, you mentioned that as an interim candidate, there may be things people didn't know about you. One thing that I find very interesting is part of your research background is you've conducted research in Alaska, Alcatraz Island, Costa Rica, which, side note, I really, really like Costa Rica. I try to go there at least once a year. As listeners know, I used to, I'm fluent in Spanish and used to be a Spanish teacher. And then you study the rare, actually, to do it justice, can you pronounce the name of the rare orchid you study in Texas?
Yeah, Hexalectris. It's a
Heck,
not a very orchid-like orchid, not a very
okay.
like plant.
Okay, and is that I'm just curious what makes that unique to Texas, and how did that end up on your research agenda?
So I think it's funny, I tell people that perhaps one of the best things about my career, and sometimes for a lot of us, is that serendipity plays more role than we might realize. That there's a chance that serendipity, it's not to say that it's being, having this opportunity that suddenly comes up, but it's also being prepared for that opportunity that comes up. And so I'd say that, you know, being in those places, having the opportunity to do research in those places, some of it has just been the right place, the right time with the right
Mm-hmm.
skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to come into something and say, I'll go up to Alaska and do research as an undergrad and live on an island with hundreds of thousands of birds and 3 people, and be able to manage that and decide that that's what I wanted to do with my life. That's a pretty great opportunity that's placed in your way. And you have to also thank the people who trusted you to do this, even if you might have appeared inept at the start. I think what's with the orchid, right? I mean, I'd studied birds my whole field biology career and suddenly started studying plants because I looked down one day and saw it and asked a question. And so as a scientist does, you look at something, you ask a question, I'll go look it up. And then for me, that turned into 13 years of research, just happening to ask the question about that species. And so some of the common denominators for those different research jobs have to do with the uniqueness of place and how place really is influential in terms of the ecology of the species that are there. And so the Hexalectris orchids in Texas is a unique combination of soil type and climate that help them to thrive here, and they have a unique place in this ecosystem. But even, the work on Alcatraz, I was able to get that through just going out there and meeting with somebody, connecting with them, and having this opportunity to do my dissertation work out on Alcatraz. But I think it's also it has fed into my I think it's fed into my leadership, and my path in academic leadership has, in that what I really enjoyed about Costa Rica or Alcatraz or the Hexalectris work had to do with communicating to people about why it was important. So why is this biologist working on Alcatraz when there's this great prison to go view and there's all this sinister history that's there? So why should we care about the birds that are on Alcatraz? Why should we care about this strange orchid that's there? Why in Costa Rica should you care about all these little interesting pockets of forest that have different histories and how they connect with each other? And so I think having that experience to explain to people as a biologist why this study is important has helped me to say, okay, why is this job role that I have now important? Why, what, and it has to be, you have to translate what you do to others. You're not going to be able to assume that they understand. One of the first things that happened in my appointment as provost has been, I have lots of people outside that I connect with through various different community organizations. And they, if they see they know about the job, they say, congratulations, it's exciting that you're a provost. The second thing they say always is, what is a provost? That is what everybody asks. And so you have to then communicate, okay, this is what I do and why I do it, and why it's important to the university that job role is there. So I think being a biologist to explain a weird orchid has helped me be a provost and explain this weird job here at this university.
Oh, Marcy, that is so well said. We could do an entire episode on just what you mentioned on your background in biology and understanding place and asking questions. And it's clear that that is really in a positive way translated to your roles as a leader. And I agree too. There was a time in my career, I probably asked what a provost was. And so but anybody, always, if you cannot answer that question, even if people know what a department chair is, I think it's important for us to be able to answer that. What is your job and what do you do? So I would say as our time comes to a close here, Marcy, any final bits of advice or wisdom for chairs, directors, other mid-level positions in higher ed who want to improve their organizations by improving themselves as leaders?
I read a lot in the higher ed literature, and one of my favorite people to read is Marjorie Haas, who has written a book on women in academic leadership. And I've had
Yeah.
the pleasure and the honor to be able to talk with her at times with ACAD events. And one of my favorite quotes from her that she's given is that your job is hard because it's hard. And it sounds a little weird, but it's just to say that your job is hard because it's hard. It means that your job is not hard because you don't know how to do it, or your job is not hard because you're not putting enough time into it. It could just be that the job is really hard. And so if we accept that it's not my failure necessarily to say that why I'm feeling this is a difficult moment, maybe if it's a conflict I'm trying to resolve, but accept that it's a difficult job. Accept that there are going to be some things that being a chair that are difficult, being a peer leader like that somebody who rises to from at one point being a peer to the next point being someone's boss, and but say, okay, it's going to be difficult. So let's say I may have the tools. So what tools do I have to do this difficult thing? And if it may be hard for less time, you might be able to have a chance to have things get easier for you. But I think that it takes a little bit of the self-doubt away when you acknowledge the difficulty of it and then say, that's okay. That's okay. And but we can rise to that occasion. We can be able to meet the challenge.
Well, I can't think of a better place to end. What that is so important. Certainly departmental chairs, the job is hard because it's a hard job. And I love that advice. That resonates with me, and thank you for sharing that. So, folks, I know that you heard something. You probably took notes. Hopefully, you hit pause. You shared it with people, but had a great time talking to Dr. Marcy Brown Marsden today. She is the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs, Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, Texas. And again, Dr. Brown Marsden, thank you so much for lending your time, expertise, and talents to this show. You added value to people that you might never meet, and that says a lot about your ability and character as a leader. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
So, friends, as always, thank you for joining us on the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. As always, I wish you well, and we will see you next time. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed listening to Dr. Marcy Brown Marsden as much as I did. Final quick takeaway here in Chris's Corner. A word that comes to my mind, and there are many that I think we could choose, but listening to Marcy's journey, her advice, the things that she has accomplished and has led in her position, I think of courage. Courage, part of the definition is its mental or moral strength to persevere and withstand things that can be fearful or difficult. One of the things that we talked about is that she served her current institution in many ways, including as an interim, and then went on to apply and receive the job. That's very difficult. It takes a lot of courage to do that. In addition, she had to oversee some accreditation initiatives. She had to build community and consensus. She also talked about maintaining our scholarship while serving in leadership positions. The other thing that she said towards the end that really resonated with me was that quote by Marjorie Haas, which is, "The job is hard because it's hard." Wow, I'm tempted to put that on a Post-it right above my above my desk and remind myself. I want to just encourage you moving forward then. We know that part of being a good leader is being courageous. And in addition, I think it keeps us centered to know that the job is hard because it's hard. All right, you signed up for this. I signed up for this. Leadership is in many ways a calling, and there are things that most of our colleagues not in leadership positions neither want to do nor are necessarily prepared to do. The job is hard because it's hard. And so the next time you have something causing you a little anxiety, probably related to conflict, which is going to happen every day in the life of a leader, just step back and maybe remember the quote that Marjorie shared by way of Marjorie Haas, and that is, the job is hard because it's hard. That's okay. Embrace that. Lean into it and recognize that you were called for such a time as this. You are in your position because you're the best person to do that, and it's your job to stand up, be courageous, do the hard things so you can serve those in your organization. Until next time, friends. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.